So back in the early 90s, I was still a guy just reading car magazines, and I had been reading this guy's stuff and being influenced by it for a long time. But this car really influenced me, and you were really involved when Mark Stielow was building this, and you guys kind of became friends.
Yeah.
And then the whole pro touring thing came out of this. So do you remember when you first met Mark and you first kind of started to talk about this car?
I'm not sure I can really tell you exactly when we met. Probably Mark might remember, but I just remembered this car as being very substantial because he was doing exactly what I thought was kind of fun. I started an event at Carcraft magazine called Real Street Eliminator, and he was fundamentally about this kind of car. And there's probably 100 other people that were doing this, but I think he did the best job of creating a car that would really do what we were all trying to do. And he did the best job of it. Plus, on top of that, damn good driver. So combine his driving skills with his car building skills, and this was the prototype piece that's got it all started. And so we pushed that whole concept. We just didn't know what really it was. It didn't have a name. It needs a name, because if we're going to hang this thing, or we're going to promote this thing, you need to be able to have a very short term, like Pro Street, that works. 2 weeks later, he calls me on the phone and says, I have a name, Pro Touring. I went, oh man. So I made a decal, and it was a difficult fight for management to get them to support it, because this was way out front thinking, and they were looking at immediate results, right? And so it was a battle, but eventually, the groundswell was there, and the readers supported it. It was like, yeah, give us more, and it all went from there.
And so, of course, that turned into a real serious trend among hot rodders.
And now, you look at all these cars that are here now, and probably, unless it's a custom or something else, it's a pro touring car.
Now, did you drive this car or ride in it back in the day? Do you recall that at all?
I never had a chance to, And in fact, I think I got to drive the Red Witch for about, a couple of miles or something like that. We were at an event somewhere in, where were we? Kentucky. Yeah. And you want to drive this thing? It's like, yeah. But, 2-lane road, what are you going to do? Yeah. And it's like the whole going through your head, don't crash this thing. Don't bend up his car. So, yeah, it would be fun to take it to the track. I wish that he was on the West Coast at Willow Springs. They were doing, I think it was an Optima commercial, and just boiled the tires off the car. And had I known, I would have invited myself out. It might have been a fun deal. Yeah, I might have got a chance to drive the car. Yeah.
Now, you just mentioned the Optima event, and you said earlier that you competed in that in one of the years when Mark competed. And what car did you have? Your blue Chevelle?
Yeah, it was the blue 65 Chevelle. And he had, I think he won that year, but so I'd never been to the track before. It was at Pahrump. Okay. And so we're standing, there's a photo in the story I did of Mark and I standing there, and I had a friend of mine take the picture. So I said, Mark, where am I going to crash? What's the hardest corner? And he goes, this one right here. That's where I crashed.
But you didn't.
I didn't crash, but I went off. Yeah.
So I'm going to take a look under the hood here, and maybe you can recognize some of the stuff from back in the day. This engine is an aluminum block, 400. I think now it's bored out beyond 400.
Camaro, roughly the number one spark plug is even with the front axle center line. Corvettes, motors pushed back 3 or 4 inches. So the Camaros are not as good as a Corvette, but they're better than a Chevelle. The Chevelle, the axle center line is in the middle of the motor, so half the motor hangs out over the nose. So he did one Chevelle, but only one Chevelle. Yeah. The way you can make them handle is to get the weight distribution 50-50, or as close as you can. The best I've ever been able to do with an iron block, small block in my Chevelle is about 53%. Mark's probably right at 50-50 with this aluminum small block, and that was way back in the day. This was breaking level stuff. Nobody was building aluminum small blocks for street motors back then. Nobody. So it was very impressive because it's so expensive. Right. But then you say, okay, so it's a full-on race motor. No, this thing's got air conditioning. It's got power steering. Later he went to dry sumps systems. Obviously the new Corvettes all have them now, but dry sumps back then, that was race car exotic stuff. The idea for a car like this would be to build a broad power range, make the torque curve linear so it's easy to drive. The more power you make, you get there. Everybody thinks, I got to have 1,000 horsepower. It's like, how hard it is to drive a 1,000 horsepower car, especially with small tires, and be able to have the ability to come off the corner, not just mash the throttle, because they'll just light tires up and you spin and go out of the way. So it's really hard to do. You'll probably never see a turbo motor for his deal, because they're light switches and they're very, very difficult to drive. So,
well, it certainly feels good to drive, and now that the engine's revised and has 600 and something horsepower, even though it's still very drivable, It would be real interesting to get it back out on a road course and see what it could do. The car is here. It's still live on Hemmings Auction. Check it out. If you're at the SEMA show, or you're going to be, come by the Lingenfelter booth and take a look at this thing. It's a real piece of history. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll talk to you later.